Hello and welcome to a Gaston County Community Talk podcast. I am your host for this episode, Scotty Reid. For those that do not know me, I'm a local activist and the founder of the nonprofit new media organization, Black Talk Media Project. The views I express on these podcasts are my own and do not necessarily represent the views of the Black Talk Media Project. On this particular episode, I will be giving commentary on two articles that recently appeared in the local paper, the Gaston Gazzette, which in my opinion does a decent job in covering local issues objectively and providing a platform for members of the community to speak on the issues through letters to the editor. The two articles are concerning a local charter school reversing a decision on mandating masks for students and employees, and another article concerning charter schools and their roles in education in the state of North Carolina. Both of these articles elicited strong responses on the Gazette's Facebook page, and I'll be directing most of my commentary in response to those comments. Let's get started. This article appeared about 21 hours ago in the Gaston Gazette's Facebook feed. It says that Gaston County Department of Health and Human Services has recommended that local schools require folks inside of school buildings to wear masks regardless of their vaccination status. So it's talking about Gaston County's largest charter school reversing a decision, and they are making masks in class mandatory. So that's both for students as well as teachers, and this is something that's been playing out all over the country. I really don't understand the hesitancy. Now, let me back up. I do understand vaccine hesitancy, although I am fully vaccinated, and I encourage others to get vaccinated during this very, very serious pandemic. We have a COVID-19 virus that's been around for over a year now, or going close to a year, but now because of the unvaccinated, the Delta variant was able to incubate in those people's bodies, and now it's even affecting the vaccinated folks. So please wear your mask when you're indoors around other people. Masks do work. But let's get to some of the comments. Okay, so Phil Flowers said on the Facebook page of the Gaston Gazette, I would love to see parents and kids stand up and say, my body, my choice. Again, I don't understand why the anti-masker crowd is adopting talking points from the pro-choice movement, which is in reference to women being able to get abortions. So it would stand to reason, well, I'm not going to say, well, if you think everybody's body, what they do with it is their choice, then you should be against, restricting abortions. You should be against penalizing or criminalizing sex work. You should be against charging people for using sex workers. And when I say charge, I mean criminal charges. Okay, if it's their body and their choice among consenting adults. But listen, ain't no children going to be standing up talking about my body, my choice, as it pertains to wearing masks to mitigate the transmission of a contagion. The children are going to follow the direction of adults, and hopefully those adults are giving them good direction. But unfortunately, we see that a lot of parents, and I don't know if I should say a lot, because the vast majority of people in the United States do want mask mandates as it pertains to schools and even other public spaces. there's a very small, very loud, and often violent minority. Okay, so any children that's standing outside protesting wearing a mask, they're just following the directions of their parents. It happens on a number of issues. Children are not intelligent enough, not educated enough until we educate them on being able to make a decision, all right, about what is the proper protocols to use when you're facing a very dangerous, very deadly contagion. So I do like what Kurt Kleinsmith had to say. That's the thing. Some of you don't realize it is your body that will be affected. By all means, do as you wish. But since this is a transmissible disease, your actions or inactions could affect others' bodies as well. And indeed it does. There's a lot of evidence to back up what Kurt is saying here. Then we have Mitch Welch Tucker. Ridiculous. They have proven time and time again masks don't work. Stop falling for the liberal crap. So apparently this is a very partisan person. You would assume a conservative. They could not be. But when people use buzzwords like, liberal crap, or they're calling people libtards and things of that nature, something that the late Rush Limbaugh, heavily promoted, just very divisive type language and what have you. So I don't know where Mitch is getting their information from, but surgical masks, for example, have been around for over 100 years. Do you know how surgical masks first came into existence, Mitch? Well, it was a Chinese doctor. I don't recall his name right now. I did post some information about him days ago, but there was a plague that was going on. I don't remember the name of the plague right now. I don't think it was the bubonic plague, but it was a plague. And this Chinese doctor discovered that it was being transmitted through the air, from human to human, through contact and through the air. And he invented a face mask, and that did help mitigate and slow down the transmission of that plague that they were facing. And then you had European doctors decades later, I believe in the early 19th century, adopt those face masks for surgery as a way to not transmit any germs, any viruses that they may have been carrying themselves, being asymptomatic, meaning not showing any symptoms, but they're, cutting into people, treating open wounds and what have you. And then, you're transmitting through your breath and speaking and what have you. You're transmitting those viruses into that person's open wound. And so they adopted that years ago. Okay. Early 19th century. So there's plenty of evidence to show that these surgical masks do help, do tremendously. Nothing's 100%, but do tremendously help in reducing the transmission of airborne diseases, or diseases that are carried in the body and expelled into the air by human beings. So I don't know where you're getting this information from. There's a lot of scientific data on that. I know there's a lot of misinformation going on. I would hope that you would do your own research and would look at medical journals and look up the history of surgical masks. We've had people claiming that you can pass out from wearing a mask, as one of these ladies with this sign, "Oxygen is essential, mask optional." These are anti-maskers protesting outside of a school. So we heard people say things like, or trying to make a comparison to like a car's exhaust, with carbon monoxide coming out of a car exhaust system. And carbon monoxide is deadly. It'll kill you. It's a deadly gas. And so they want to try to say the same thing happens if your exhaust coming out of your mouth and your nose is going into this mask and what have you. That's just totally ridiculous. That is absurd. Again, since the early 19th century, we've had doctors, surgeons, using these surgical masks, some of them performing, surgeries that last hours. I've read about surgeries, depending upon the type of surgery, lasting over 10 hours. And I've yet to read a story about a surgeon passing out from his own exhaust because he had on a surgical mask for all of those hours. Let's not be ridiculous, okay? And yes, oxygen is essential. I've worn these masks, went out in public. I've been protesting with masks on. So I've yet to pass out from these masks. I've, yet to go to the doctor and they, detect something wrong with me, like a carbon monoxide build up in my blood. This is just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And I really don't understand it, to say that a lot of people are foolish. They're foolish in their assumptions, and they're the victims of misinformation or their own willful ignorance. All right. So I've talked about people being violent, ripping off teachers' masks. Well, if that's their body and their choice, why do we have parents going to parent-teachers conferences or meeting the teachers, since it's a new school year, and ripping their mask off? You're not respecting those teachers. It's their body and it's their choice as well. This is just really absurd to me. I've never seen anything like it. Now, I've also stated that perhaps the reason some of these schools are reversing their decisions, and some of these school boards are reversing their decisions and recommending or requiring that people mask up. The reason that they're doing that is because their county health departments, their state health departments, and then we have the federal health department called the CDC, which some people have politicized and used that. Fauci, him accusing people of worshiping falsely. I mean, it's just all ridiculous. But I suspect the reason that many of them have reversed these ridiculous decisions is because they can be sued. They can be sued. And so a person said I was being absurd, I was being ridiculous for suggesting that if a school intentionally creates an unsafe environment, that person or that school could be sued, or that school board could be sued. They carry insurance for a reason. So I decided to, just look it up and ask, can a school be sued? And many of these different attorney websites popped up. When you're suing people for injuries and what have you. And so this is what it says in relation to schools. One of the websites said, personal injuries, as with any other business or organizations, schools have a reasonable right to ensure the safety of their patrons at all times. A school that creates or ignores hazardous conditions out of sheer ignorance or negligence can be held at fault if that negligence causes a personal injury. Now, we're talking about a virus that has tens of thousands of children hospitalized in the ICU all across the United States, mostly coming from these states like Florida and Mississippi. It's so bad in Mississippi that recently I read an official said that they're going to start putting people in jail and prison time if they break quarantine. Now, how that, jives with their constitution, I don't know. Their state constitution, I'm not getting into the legalities of that because I haven't researched it. But in terms of intentionally creating conditions where a person can easily catch COVID and potentially be hospitalized and potentially die, that school is liable if they're ignoring the advice of the county health department, of the state health department, and the CDC. It goes on. That's a personal injury that you created. And I don't care if I am wearing my mask. Masks are not 100%. Again, they do drastically reduce the transmission of the virus. But we're talking about children here. We're talking about children who may not be properly wearing their mask or keeping it on right the entire time, and hopefully the teachers are monitoring for that. But if you have, let's say, ban mask mandates, and you allow potentially infected children to come in and infect other children, that's intentional. You intentionally created those conditions which caused a personal injury through your negligence. So it goes on to say, if the school poorly maintains their playground, for example, and your child breaks a leg on a broken swing, you may be able to sue them for medical bills. Certainly, a lot of people are facing huge medical bills from being hospitalized with COVID. If you break a leg on a slippery walkway while going to pick up your child, you may be able to sue for medical bills and lost time at work. What if I have to stay home and care for my child because they got infected at the school? All right. The one key element is that you must be able to prove the school actually contributed to the harm. So I think the evidence is clear. Scientists, medical doctors who aren't quacks, but all the health boards, whether it's state, county, are recommending that these children wear these masks, as this Delta variant is ravishing the United States right now, and it's killing children. It's even killing vaccinated people, although they do stand a better chance of surviving and not developing those deadly symptoms. But that's the reason why they're now recommending booster shots. So because of people have wait for so long without either access to the vaccines, and that's mostly in other countries, or because they refuse to get vaccinated. And again, I understand vaccine hesitancy, but all the studies all the research that has been done thus far with these vaccines, and they did go through clinical trials and had emergency approval. And one of them, I heard on Monday, the FDA is about to give its full approval. But I'm not even buying that argument, because a lot of people are skeptical of the FDA and skeptical of other vaccines and other medications and what have you. So I'm not convinced that once the FDA gives its full approval to a COVID vaccine, that you're going to get vaccinated. You're just saying that now. Oh, it's still experimental and all this and that. In the meantime, the COVID virus, COVID-19, has been mutating into different variants, and variants that's more dangerous than the original variant that the vaccines were created for. So I'll tell you. Now, let's move on to the next story. This is concerning charter schools. An article appeared in the Gazette and on their Facebook feed. The headline is, North Carolina charter schools remain wealthier and whiter than local districts. Will they change? It also added an excerpt from the article. Some allege North Carolina charters spark white flight, a historically charged term with ties to the era of school desegregation, in which white parents seek whiter schools for their children. And so before I get to some of the comments, this is history. This is history, okay? White flight has long been documented with the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which killed Jim Crow, legally killed Jim Crow, with the Supreme Court ruling that separate is not equal, does not automatically mean equal. And so then in the urban areas, you would see these white people fleeing the urban inner cities and moving out to the suburbs, because when I lived in Detroit, I was born here in Gaston County, but my mom moved to Detroit when I was just 2 years old, and I lived in Detroit up until I was 12 years old. And one of the neighborhoods that I lived in was very, very diverse, very diverse. White people lived up the street, down the street, across the street, along with, us black people. So I lived in a very diverse community. One of the neighborhoods I lived in Detroit was very diverse. But, when they started, and I actually went to a segregated school, and I was one of the first black children to be bused from my neighborhood school across the town to a white school. And you know, I didn't like it because I was being taken away from teachers that I knew. Okay. But still though, you had white parents remove their children from those schools. The record is clear. There's plenty of evidence. There's photographic evidence. There is news articles. There are people speaking on it themselves, standing outside, yelling at black kids, you know, being escorted into the school. And so this kind of ties into this nonsense about banning critical race theory, even though, you know, segregation was a legal issue. It is a legal issue, and critical race theory does examine the impact on non-white people that racist laws have had. Just merely talking about white flight doesn't mean that it's critical race theory. And we've had these people coming out to these school boards with their scripted performances at K through 12 school boards and don't even know what critical race theory is and cannot point on their local school curriculum one single class that's teaching critical race theory. This is a wholly manufactured issue that was created by Republicans, by conservative operatives to distract from the fact that you don't have affordable health care. You know, we just had the Cleveland County man threaten to blow up 2 blocks in Washington, D.C. in his big truck. And one of the reasons that he had his mental breakdown that he cited was medical bills and not being able to pay for the treatment. But he should be not mad at Joe Biden, not for that issue, or mad at Barack Obama, because the Affordable Care Act expanded Medicaid and Medicare, but Republicans in the state of North Carolina refused to expand Medicaid and Medicare. So he can thank them for why his wife's medical bills got out of hand, why his medical bills got out of hand. But he's up there to target Joe Biden. But again, this man was also delusional in thinking that, you know, his dear leader, Donald Trump, won the 2020 election, which is another myth that a lot of these people are the same one, believe in this myth, and are the same ones who are out here as anti-maskers. Even Donald Trump himself recommended that people get vaccinated, with himself being vaccinated, and he's largely been silent on this, but he was at a super spreader rally in Alabama talking about get vaccinated, and they booed him. He can't even convince some of these people to get vaccinated. But when we're talking about masks, I don't see how a person can be anti-mask. Okay, you don't want to get the vaccine, but do you not believe that all of these news stories of people on their deathbeds in ICU saying, I should have got the vaccine? Do you not believe all of these stories? Do you not believe that the people in your community that's being reported to be filling up the ICUs and dying from it, and then even if they recover, they're having what's known as long haul COVID with all of these symptoms and decreased quality of their health? Just ridiculous. But anyway, let me move on to those comments on white flight. I mean, a lot of people are acting like fragile snowflakes, man. And I don't use that in a derogatory term, but a snowflake is very fragile. A little bit of heat, it starts melting away. And some of these people are all in their feelings, and they're being very, very fragile, like snowflakes are fragile. So let me move on to some of the comments that was made. All right, so we got Charles Hudson says, or maybe he read the headline, he read the little excerpt on Facebook, and this is a pet peeve of mine as a person who runs an organization that is very involved in disseminating media, and that includes operating Facebook pages like this one. A lot of people, one of my pet peeves is they'll read the headline of a podcast I might have created and think they had the whole story, and then they're commenting on it and making all of these assumptions. When I was in the United States military and basic training at Fort Jackson, One of my drill sergeants said to me, don't assume anything. Because when you make assumptions or you assume something, you're making an ass out of you and me. That's what, ASS, UME, assume. Don't make an ass of yourself by making comments without reading the content. Maybe this person isn't a subscriber and they couldn't read the article, but again, a lot of people are already in their emotions and they're just looking to lash out at every little thing. And a lot of these people, I don't even know why they follow the Gazette on Facebook, because they always complaining about it and talking about like it's discriminatory against them or something. And these are mostly neo-Confederate conservatives. All right. I'm sure they didn't like the Gazette publishing that speech that was given in, 1912 or 1913 at the dedication of that neo-Confederate monument, and this person praising segregation and was mad because black men who saved the Union got the right to vote. So yeah, but so this person, Charles, says, or maybe it has nothing to do with race at all. Maybe it has everything to do with terrible school systems that don't discipline children, tie the hands of administrators, teachers, resource officers, won't expel, suspend unruly kids, that limit the advancement of the kids that do want to be there. The list goes on. I'm not for corporal punishment. I remember when I was talking in class after the bell, and a teacher, and I'm not going to say his name, but I do remember him. I was in the 7th grade. And, even in 7th grade, I was approaching 6 feet. But this teacher tells me to go out into the hallway. He comes with this big, thick paddle with holes in it, like he's going to put his hands on me. And my mother had told me when I was busted at that school in Detroit back in elementary school, don't let them put their hands on you. You make them call me. And so I told this guy, I was in the 7th grade, more than capable of defending myself, but I was like, you're not going to hit me with that. For what? For talking after the bell? I was just finishing my sentence. But if you think you're going to hit me with that, then no, you're thinking wrong, and you need to call my mom. Take me to the office and call my mom, because you're not going to hit me with this big old paddle. And so he just told me to go back in class. So anyway, I'm not for corporal punishment. You might be for strangers putting their hands on your children, but I'm not. I didn't even whoop my own children growing up. There are better ways to parent and teach children without using a rod to beat them into submission or obedience. Maybe you need to take some parenting classes if you think that's the way to go. But this person didn't read the article. I could tell, and I'm gonna show you why in just a bit, because I pulled the excerpt that was talking about, and I'll share that with you. Then Tim McCarn says, racist article, always looking to divide and cause strife. The writer of this article in the Gazette should be held accountable for reckless reporting. They don't have the demographic facts to back their claim, but choose to create a problem where there isn't one. Well, here you is creating a problem where there isn't one. And so I think a lot of these people's problem with the Gazette is that it's not like the paper of old, or perhaps even the Gazette itself. It was founded and within the publication during the 1950s, and through my study of media and reading old newspapers and stuff, like you think about the Tulsa, we just had the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa massacre in the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And a lot of the newspapers were printing articles calling on all these white supremacist terrorists to go to Tulsa to kill black people. And so, newspapers have supported slavery throughout this nation's history. And so, but perhaps because the Gazette isn't operating like that anymore, that's why they're upset. They think the Gazette is supposed to give the conservative view, and they think that they're giving a liberal view. I don't think that's the case. I'm a subscriber to the Gazette, and I read the Gazette, and I find it to be an objective newspaper. It's not cable news where you're looking at opinion news, opinion host and what have you, like what I'm doing right now. I'm giving an opinion. You know, a lot of people just don't like facts. That's what it is. They have confirmation bias, and the only thing they're looking for in print is something that's going to confirm the biases that they already hold. All right. So let's back up. What did it say? Some alleged North Carolina charters sparked white flight, a historically charged term with ties to the era of school desegregation in which white parents seek whiter schools for their children. Now, again, it says some people. And this is a historical fact, but again, some people can't accept the fact. So I went to the article and pulled the section where it talked about white flight. Again, this was an article that actually was published by USA Today and a lot of media properties, whether it be newspapers or TV news or cable news. They have affiliations or partnerships where they, cross post each other's content or what have you. So it was actually under the byline of USA Today with the author. Okay. And so it was just talking about a whole range of issues concerning charter schools and sharing data concerning charter schools. It wasn't an opinion. It wasn't an opinion article. Not in my opinion, it wasn't. It was just stating the facts. And that is a fact. But they honed in again on the headline or the excerpt from the article that the Gazette published. And they thought they read, I guess they had ESP or what do they call that? ESP or some kind of magical powers that they can know what's being published without actually reading it. So this is what that section said. White flight or right fit. When North Carolina charters began a quarter century ago, they disproportionately served Black and lower income students, said Helen Ladd, an emerita professor of public policy at Duke University. But this changed. So again, here this person that made these comments with being all in their feelings with their snowflakery, and accusing the Gazette of publishing a racist article. Basically, that's become a trend among some white people, is to claim reverse racism or they become this persecuted class, always playing the victim card. Something that conservatives always blame Black people for doing when they're stating the facts. Concerning the statistical data that shows disproportionate policing, disproportionate access to healthcare, housing, and also employment, employment discrimination and inequities involving pay. So it goes on, but this article said that charter schools first started in North Carolina to serve Black and lower income students. Okay. But this changed, Ladd noted, as more white families grew dissatisfied with their local districts. It didn't say nothing about it grew because these white families didn't want their kids going to school with Black people or Hispanic people or indigenous people or Asian people. It said they became dissatisfied with the local district. So the very thing this person said it might have to do with is in this article that they did not take the time to read. Okay. It puts in quotations, white parents, as they were leaving traditional public schools to go to charter schools, it was pretty clear they were looking for whiter schools, she said. So the facts are the facts. You can debate the facts, but why are you mad at the Gazette for publishing the article, for publishing what this woman said? This professor at Duke University. That's what she said. Now, it goes on to say, some allege North Carolina charters sparked white flight, a historically charged term with ties to the era of school desegregation. That's a fact. That's all the Gazette wrote in its excerpt above the article on their Facebook page. While Ladd doesn't agree with this blanket label for charters, she said many serve that function. Okay, so the facts are the facts. While I'm sure some of these parents wouldn't be honest with us and say that's the reason why they pull their children out of, let's say, East Gaston, and put them in a charter school that was predominantly white, and because they could afford it. I'm sure they probably wouldn't admit that up front, but I bet you a lot of them would if they can make it anonymously. So these people aren't just pulling this stuff out of their behinds. There has been research that was done, but you should at least, if you're going to make comments about an article, at least take the time to read it. And then you would have seen that this person doesn't agree with that. It's just making us that you shouldn't put a blanket label on all charter schools or on all white families, as that's the reason that they pulling them out. Me, I don't really support charter schools. I haven't done enough research on it, but I do know that charter schools harm the funding of public schools. Okay, it pulls funding away from those public schools. And so for that reason, I'm really not on board with charter schools, but I do believe in freedom of choice. You want to send your child to a school for whatever reason, that's your choice. That's your choice. But stop with all this white fragility and snowflakery and blasting on the Gazette simply for sharing excerpts from an article published by USA Today. I assume one of their partners. I just gave a lesson on assuming things, but I think that's a pretty good bet that they have a partnership with USA Today. All right, this has been Scotty Reid with a Gaston County Community Talk. I'm gonna try to do more of these, but I'm a very, very busy person, as I do operate, maintain other media properties. I produce several different podcasts, and I host a couple myself. So I do, my media organization, Black Talk Media Project, is getting into launching localized new media platforms. We're working on one right now with media partners in Richmond, Virginia. That site was up for about a month, but had some technical problems with it, so it's down now, but I'm bringing it back. And I tried to do the same thing with Gaston County, because hey, if I'm not trying to make the place where I live a better place, then I ain't got no business managing a website that has a global audience. If I'm not trying to help the people right here in my community, I need to be practicing what I preach. So when I first launched Gaston County Community Talk, I asked for volunteers, because we're a very small nonprofit, can't afford to pay anyone. I don't even pay myself a salary, but we are able to pay our bills and what have you. But I asked for volunteers and nobody stepped up. But if you are interested in becoming part of Gaston County Community Talk, if you have something to offer to the community, some insight, please feel free to hit me up. All right, you can call the Black Talk Media Project and leave a message at 704-817-2161, 704-817-2161, or you can email me at info, that's INFO, at blacktalkmediaproject.org. That's it. Until next time, peace and blessings to all. And mask up, people. Mask up.